yes, sir, Mr. Charismatic leader, what will we do next? And we wound up in Vietnam.
Yeah, that classic right-wing behavior, right? Classic pro-MAGA, pro-Donald Trump sentiment. I don't like the idea of everybody following a charismatic dude who leads us into unjustified wars of aggression. How Dune is pro-MAGA and Donald. I can't make this up. I kind of hate this guy now. How Dune is pro-MAGA and Donald Trump. I cannot express how stupid that is as a sentence adequately. I do not have the language. I do not have the verbal capacity to adequately represent how monumentally stupid this title is, just by itself. Is his whole thing going to be the author was Republican? Because if his whole thing is that Frank Herbert was a Republican, like no, I'm sorry. That does not make Dune pro-MAGA. That doesn't even make Frank Herbert pro-MAGA. Frank Herbert, by the way, was extremely hostile to the persecution of communists in America. He grew up and was ensconced in a different culture. He was a reader of a lot of reactionary science fiction. Dune is the most quintessentially leftist sci-fi that you will read from that era. It introduced systems theory to a massive swath of people who otherwise may have never encountered it. Systems theory, by the way, systems approaches to politics and society and ecology and all these things are the most anti-conservative positions you can have. No, President Sunday, you're forgetting the name MAGA communism. Yeah, but MAGA communists are just pro-Trump reactionaries that have decided to pretend to be minor Command and Conquer Red Alert villains, so there. All right, I have my very undistinguished copy of Dune here. We're going to get into this. This is going to be plain and simple.
So this is a video about why Frank Herbert and his Dune books would support a pro-Make America Great Again outlook.
I'm going to call it right here. He hasn't read the books. He's going to be basing this off of Wikipedia articles about the man's interviews and his political associations, his interpersonal associations, and the movies. That's my assumption. Because the movies, by the way, are right-wing. Kavernacle is constantly mentioning how drugs and cannabis are anti-leftist, which is very well to say as a totally healthy man who has never touched a drug. Oh, is he going down that road? There's a whole lot of, like, really shitty, grifty, derivative pseudo-leftist creators who have been taking a very authoritarian bent lately in order to appeal to a crowd that thinks it's really cool to control people's bodies. For some reason, I guess because, you know, the Republicans are in power and are you know, waging war globally, therefore authoritarianism is hip and cool again. It's weird. It's weird. Which, by the way, reminder, if you're a Vosh viewer in this day and age, you have no self-respect, and I feel nothing about you.
Now, I specifically mean these books and his own politics would have meant he would have supported Donald Trump for president both times.
How?
But it's probably not.
How did the politics of Dune mean that he would support Donald Trump? How?
In the way you actually think. And that's what this video is going to be dealing with today. Like, why does Dune support this? And
it doesn't.
why would he support this? And part 2 of this video is...
Here's the thing. So these are actually two very unrelated questions, and they're very unrelated questions. So here's an example. Does Ender's Game represent an ethos or portray an ethos or whatever that would be supportive of MAGA or Donald Trump? No. Categorically not. Does Orson Scott Card? Yes. Because Orson Scott Card is a religious bigot. Ender's Game is a very well crafted, very insightful, very conscientious novel. These are separate things from each other. You can be an asshole who produces something good. You can be an asshole who produces something good despite yourself. Sunday, how much are movies close to the books? The movies are a complete betrayal of the themes of the books. Like a complete betrayal of the themes of the books. The movies aren't just a bad representation, they actually represent the polar opposite of the values of the books. Genuinely. The movies are a travesty. I hate the Dune movies so much.
About why Dune and Frank Herbert would have supported Elon Musk and Doge gutting the federal government.
Jesus Christ.
Now, I need to start this video by kind of nipping some criticism in the bud, because many people on YouTube have called me the Muad'Dib, the Lisan al-Gaib, because I often predict things.
No, you don't? Like what?
Predict the downfall of Mr. Beast. Predict the
downfall of Mr. Beast has a... Mr. Beast is incredibly rich and successful. What do you mean the downfall of Mr. Beast?
Downfall of like certain liberal YouTubers. And I am predicting right now.
Like who? What are you talking about?
I can see you doing this. You are leaving me an annoying comment. You are leaving me an annoying comment telling me how I'm actually wrong. Did I even read the books? And the question I'll throw
No, you didn't.
back at people.
And if you did read them, you read them badly.
Have you read the books? Have
Yes.
you read all 6 of the books? What do you know about Frank Herbert's own political views? And how much do you recognize them manifesting in the Dune books? So if you don't know these things, please don't reactively comment based on the title, because you end up looking stupid. So when I made a video about why Dune was right about AI, someone wrote,
Dune didn't talk about AI. What do you mean Dune was right about AI? You think there is no AI. ChatGPT isn't AI. ChatGPT is not a thinking machine. What? Wow.
how the fuck do you read the Dune books and come to the conclusion that the Butlerian jihad was good? It resulted in thousands of years of galactic feudalism. It makes cyberpunk dystopias seem like heaven. What is wrong with these people? Someone responding, isn't it clear that the jihad was the only way to avoid absolute horrors? Like, sure, it turned out bad, but agents...
No, nothing's clear. Nothing. It's like a distant cultural memory. Nobody even knows what it was.
In the moment, wasn't it clear the thing to do? The person who talked about my interpretation of this said, I haven't read Dune to comment, just know some of the lore. So if you just know some of the lore, if you have just consumed the lore on wiki pages and you...
Okay, so we're picking out people in our comment sections as a preemptive defense who haven't read the book. That's the level we're operating at here. That's embarrassing.
YouTube videos about Dune, please don't comment telling me I'm wrong, because you don't understand Dune. And this goes to a broader point, I feel like, about mythology around fiction. So Lord of the Rings and Dune are often contrasted against each other for basically being the polar opposites of each other. One is complete political allegory to the point that...
They are not. Neither of them are allegories. Neither of them are allegories. They are compared with each other in terms of scope and in terms of the type of world building that they have. They are not. No.
Some of the Dune books, especially the God Emperor of Dune, are basically Frank Herbert's political manifesto. A lot of Leto II's own speeches and journal entries are pretty much self-inserts from Frank Herbert himself.
Okay, here's the thing about... Okay, Jesus. Here's the thing about the inserts in the Dune novels. They're inserts in novels. So, for example, I can have a position politically, and I can recognize that there are other people who have an opposite position, and I can weigh them with some level of balance. I may even hold a position that I think is less likely to be correct than somebody else's position for reasons of an effective nature. I'm emotionally or culturally attached to one, and I'm willing to see something lose, right? For example, in Children of Dune, Leto II, no, not Leto II, his sister, Ganima, assassinates a mathematician who claimed he could predict history with mathematics, with mathematical modeling. This is a parody of Harry Seldon's Psychohistory, which you may remember from the bastardization of that language by the not Professor Jang person we were covering a little while ago, in the Foundation novels. Because partially, Dune was a commentary on a lot of the attitudes towards individuality, society, and so on and so forth, and its relationship with the world that the Foundation novels represented. And I like the Foundation novels. But that does not mean that this person was staking out the opposite view. That's a part of representing the different positions. And to be clear, everything ends in dust in Dune. Like that's there is no side, quote unquote, is ascendant in the end. Everyone is gone. Chapter House Dune is distant in the future.
Someone like Tolkien hated political allegory, hated comparisons of his work to contemporary politics, and completely rejected those. But there's a certain mythology that builds up around both bodies of work. So if these two videos do well, I'm going to make a bonus.
Frank Herbert was not making analogies or metaphors or allegories. Frank Herbert wrote a world that actually made sense based on the principles that govern our world, in the exact same way that Tolkien did, by the way. Tolkien had a different understanding of them. Tolkien didn't insist upon making his world nonsense. It was built upon how our world functioned. The only difference is that Frank Herbert understood a little bit about how capitalism worked.
Bonus video about why all your takes about Dune are wrong. So there's a couple about Dune, like Dune is an anti-white savior story. White savior specifically. Like it really engages with racial dynamics and stuff.
I mean, it does kind of. It's definitely like it casts an evil, cynical eye on European saviors, because it points out that actually the problem to which they are an answer was manufactured also by them. So, yeah.
Stuff like that. That's a completely wrong interpretation of what Dune is trying to say about Messiah figures. It doesn't engage with the racial dynamics in the same way.
But it does, though, especially when you understand, especially by the time that Frank Herbert is writing, as in our own time, Islam is heavily racialized in the West. Massively so. Massively so.
People often say Tolkien was an anti-fascist, and The Lord of the Rings are an anti-fascist body of work, when Tolkien himself was a traditionalist Catholic who supported Francisco Franco in the Spanish Civil War, the guy who was fighting against communism with Hitler in Spain, someone whose politics share way more similarities with the Italian fascist Julius Evola than they do with someone like Karl Marx.
They do not. I'm sorry, no. Tolkien's politics had nothing to do with Julius Evola. Jesus fucking Christ.
But again, there's a mythology about Lord of the Rings that somehow it's anti-fascist, it's anti-war, it's about World War II, it's about World War I.
It's anti-war. Who cares if it's anti-war? Anti-war is bullshit. Seriously, like an anti-war position is bullshit. I'm against people hurting each other. Like, no shit. Except for all those times when people have contrived very convincing arguments, at least for enough people that it matters, for why they should hurt some people sometimes. Anti-war. What is this lib garbage? Seriously. You are required to go to war sometimes. If you want a communist society, and there's a really powerful state that is the one thing between you and a peaceable future in which you're able to live without the constant threat of oppression, you go to war, probably, kinda. That's a good argument at the very least. If you're in Gaza, and you are if you're in Iran, if you're in Iran and you're being attacked by the United States, you're going to war. Pretty good reason to. What, you're anti-war now? Oh, we don't actually believe in using the tools at our disposal to resist our destruction by other animals on this planet. Were you pro-war? You are all pro-war. You are all pro-war. Not just war. There is no such thing as a just war. Justice doesn't exist. You are all pro-war. You're not pro-war as an activity for funsies, but you absolutely all have a justification for war. If you don't, you have the confidence. You have the confidence that you will survive. You will survive being pro-war, or you have a very romantic notion of the end you will meet. The point isn't that we should be pro-war. The point is that anti-war as a thing to list here, as like a virtue of Lord of the Rings, which is strange because Lord of the Rings is about all the little nice hobbit folk going to war and being the good guys for it. Like, I'm sorry. No, the Lord of the Rings is not anti-war. That would make it allegory.
It's not about any of those things. The same way Dune isn't about white saviors. And that's why I think it's important when we engage with certain works of fiction, you have to have a good political education as well. Because otherwise you start buying into this mythology, start listening to people who...
Careful, Cav. Careful.
Don't even read the books, they just know the lore, as if there's some sort of authority to even comment on these things. You need to read the text, of course, but if you're analysing the politics of this work, you need to have some sort of political education.
The hobbits hate war. Hating war does not make you anti-war. That's not how that works.
And actually understand the politics of the authors involved, and if these works are explicitly political, or if they're not explicitly political in the way you think they are in terms of engaging with contemporary politics. As Lord of the Rings pretty much doesn't engage with contemporary politics until the end of The Return of the King, basically.
That's not contemporary, sir. That's early industrialization at best, and once again, not allegorical.
The scouring of the Shire and stuff like that. And that's why I want to make that video.
The scouring of the Shire is not contemporary.
About why your Dune takes are wrong, because
capitalism what? Do you no, that's not contemporary.
Recently as well, I was saying that with the new trailer for Dune Part 3, people were saying, oh my god, people are going to be so shocked when Paul's the villain of the film.
Paul's not the villain in Dune Messiah.
And there seems to be another mythology that Paul becomes Darth Vader. He's Anakin and then becomes Darth Vader. But again, that's not what happens in Dune. And even when I replied to people saying that's just, you know, not even going to happen in the movie.
That's correct.
People are saying, well, read the books.
Hang on, what was the rest of that statement? Paul never is the villain of Dune. Even the way Denise is describing his adaptation doesn't seem to suggest to be the villain of the story overall. Dune isn't about villains outside of the barren, honored matrix.
And that's just, you know, not even going to happen in the movie. People are saying, well, read the books. You haven't read the books. And that's what I mean. People don't understand what the books are about because they don't have the political context in which the books were written or what these books are even trying to say. Because if you read the books and you read all 6 of them, it's pretty clear Paul Atreides isn't some sort of villain. And Paul Atreides shares way more similarities to someone like Oedipus.
No, he's not Oedipus. He is not Oedipus. That's a mistake. Oh my god. He's only read Dune Messiah. I just realized he's only read Dune Messiah. He claims he's read all 6 books. He wikied them. He's read Dune 1 and Dune Messiah. He read Dune Messiah, the short one, because the movie's coming out. That's why this video exists. That's why this video exists. That's what it is. Good God. Is it because they're blind? Is it because they're both blind? Is that why he's like Oedipus? You see how shallow this is? No, he's not like Oedipus. He's not like Oedipus. Arguably, if you want to go the playwright route, there's a Macbeth analogy in there somewhere for Dune Messiah. A very vapid one. But he's not a Shakespearean character. No.
Rather than someone like Anakin Skywalker and Darth.
Okay, does anybody know what okay. Oedipus goes out to solve the mystery of who killed this dude, okay? And he finds out that this dude was his father, and then he married his mother, and then in his shame he blinds himself and he goes wandering in the wilderness with his daughters. Okay, that's Oedipus. That's Oedipus. This is not what happens with Paul at all. Paul gets hit by a frickin' what is it called, a stone burner or something. There's a conspiracy to assassinate Paul in Dune Messiah, and Paul eventually gets blinded by a big bomb. And then afterwards, because he is able to essentially calculate the course of events based upon the ancestral data that he is able to access due to his ingestion of the water of life, he is able to walk the path perfectly to get humanity to the ideal outcome that he can get it to, and then he disappears into the desert, and he comes back in Children of Dune, and eventually gets shanked. Okay, he is not like Oedipus at all. Can you not spoil the books? They are like 50 years old, my dude. Go read them.
Darth Vader. And if you actually have read the Dune books, you'll see that the parallels of Oedipus, apart from...
How is he not a messiah figure? He's not a messiah figure. I mean, like, socially he's a messiah figure. He's held up as a messiah figure. But, like, specifically, the books disavow that reality at all. There is no such thing as a messiah or main characters. All of the characters who are in the know, who are not the people who are subject to the the myth-making of the Bene Gesserit, and of the manipulations of the great houses and the Spacing Guild and all these people, all of their philosophy, and they spell it out for you, is about how actually no, there are no individuals, there are no whatever, there are massive flows of things, everything is connected, and you are but a small nexus of flows yourself.
Having a relationship with his mother
How long is he the main character in books? He's the main character in 2 books. Then there isn't really a main character in Children of Dune.
very, very strong throughout the Dune works. And I thought about this for the longest time. And thankfully, I actually read part of an interview with Frank Herbert where him and someone else were actually discussing the relevance to Greek mythology. And Oedipus, of course, Paul Atreides is Paul Atreides. That's a Greek name. And explicitly, his family are from a Greek background. So I wanted to get all of that out the way because I was prepared for annoying comments. And I'm just going to say, you can of course agree or disagree with what I'm saying in this video, but if you seriously have not read these books, or you haven't read them for a long time, if you don't know about the politics of these books, if you don't know about the politics of Frank Herbert, please just give this video a chance. Watch the video. I'm going to read lots of quotes from the Dune books. I'm going to read lots of quotes from Frank Herbert himself. We're going to compare them and how his own politics explicitly carry over in this, and how he would, yes, have supported Donald Trump. And in the next video, we're going to talk about how he would have supported Doge, because we have to remember Frank Herbert was an
Paul isn't Greek. Okay, listen. This is silly for a couple of reasons. One, you know what else you get in Dune? There's the Orange Catholic Bible, right? It has segments of the Quran in it. Paul is given it by his Suk doctor, mentat, Dr. Yue, which was cut from the movie because Denis Villeneuve has no respect for Dune. It is a massive cultural mutt, like everything is, because Dune takes place in the distant future, in which there are no Greeks anymore. There are names. Like dude.
conventional conservative libertarian who absolutely hated the welfare state. And as much as Paul Atreides is someone like Oedipus and Lawrence of Arabia, Paul Atreides is...
Yeah, saying Atreides is Greek, that's it. Yeah, it's silly. It's like, are the Harkonnens Russian? Are they Russians? Like, just to be clear, was chosen because it sounds Russian. It ain't Russian. Because when Herbert is writing, it is the Cold War. These things are in circulation. These are the moods, right? Why do the orc names sound like they do? Why do the Haradrim? Why are they called the Haradrim? Are they from the Middle East? No, but that's what's in the imaginary. There's an oriental bent to the styling of the things. That is not a statement about their substance. Like the cultures that you have by the time Dune is taking place are so distant from their origins, nobody knows where they come from.
Also JFK, and he very explicitly says this, and Leto II can be easily seen as both Richard Nixon or, as I'm going to make the argument, Donald Trump in 2016 or in 2026. So all of that coming up for you today. But before we go any further, this video took a lot of research.
Okay, here's a question for you. Why did Frank Herbert not like JFK? Why did he not like JFK? What was the reason? What was the reason? What was the reason that Frank Herbert didn't like JFK? Are you just floating that up there as like, oh, he didn't like JFK, he must be a Trumpian? Like, really? He was critical of a Democrat, don't you know? He was basically MAGA. Like, are you stupid? By the way, you know what wasn't passed under JFK's presidency? Just FYI. You know what wasn't passed under JFK's presidency, which a lot of people have made comments about that I must be wary about replicating on this platform? Civil Rights Act. JFK did not desire the Civil Rights Act to be passed enough in his tenure in the presidency. Is being critical of JFK for getting America into the Vietnam War, for being a charismatic persona for American imperialism with a benign seeming face, does that make him MAGA? Because Donald Trump is a charismatic figure who is driving the United States into reckless wars of destruction. All right, let's continue.
On top of making my usual regular uploads. So if you want to support my work going forward, please consider becoming a...
I've got a better Patreon. Join mine.
Don't comment before you've watched it. I will be interested in... Like I said, once you know the author's own politics, it's just so explicit. It is his political manifesto in many ways.
Okay, see what you're describing there, Kavernacle, is not explicit at all. You're like, oh well, if you understand all this background information, you can connect these dots and you can decide that these positions are actually manifest in their most crude form in this book, and that's actually what it's about. That's not how literature works at all. That is silly. That is silly. That's stupid.
Also do recognize that the new Dune films, part 1 and part 2, they are more leftist interpretations of the material, which you can kind of easily do because of the libertarian politics, which often manifest in things that you can view as anti-corporate, anti-capitalist, anti-religion,
What are you talking about?
anti-colonialism. All of that stuff is kind of in Dune where you can kind of put a leftist spin on it. And I do think Denis Villeneuve's take...
Being anti-religion is not being leftist. That's a silly kind of reductionism.
Dune is fine. I really like it. I really like those movies and stuff. But at the same time, if you actually want to argue that Dune is a leftist body of work, I think if you actually read them, it's very hard to actually make that argument. And
I think it's actually very hard to go in the opposite direction. I think it's nigh impossible. I can't think of a single conservative principle at all that is sustained by what is presented in Dune, in any of the novels for that matter. Like, full stop. Full stop. No, Herbert didn't like Nixon. Herbert liked Nixon because Nixon laid bare the duplicity of the American government. He made it obvious. He liked Nixon. He liked, quote unquote, Nixon because he was an incompetent snake who showed the world that they were ruled by snakes. That's why he liked Nixon. He didn't like Nixon.
Actually surprised conservatives haven't kind of jumped on the Dune bandwagon a lot more. I think it's probably because of how much Islam factors into the whole series that they don't want to claim it for themselves. So let's get into the video. So like I said, I'm making the argument that Frank Herbert would have been...
I really don't think that's the issue. I really don't. Ben Shapiro was fine glazing the Dune movies. I don't think...
Pro Donald Trump. Now, would he agree with Donald Trump's politics generally?
No.
I would argue no, especially...
So how does that make him... Okay, you've lost me already. It's not pro-MAGA or Donald Trump then. Like, you can't have that.
Especially in terms of environmentally.
Is this what this is going to come down to? oh, there is a logic undergirding the decisions of Leto II, therefore he is pro-Leto II. He's not pro-Leto II. Leto II fails. Leto II fails. There's not a utopia at the end of the Dune movies. They're back in a desert.
He would massively disagree with Donald Trump. The one thing, and that's for the second part of this video, that he would agree with Donald Trump in is gutting welfare, gutting the federal state, and he would very genuinely agree ideologically with things like Doge and what Elon...
No, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't, because you don't understand the logic behind that. Frank Herbert was not in favor of removing welfare because he liked the idea of poor people having to fight like rats in order to scrounge out a meager living as employees of companies before which they had no rights. Frank Herbert saw the welfare system as a system of control, which it is. It is. It's not only a system of control, it helps a lot of people. It is for a lot of people a very good thing. But now imagine that gets taken away. That is now a bargaining chip. You are now beholden to it. You are now dependent on it. You are not dependent, for example, on on-the-ground relationships with the people around you, on built-up community with the people that you live with. You are dependent now on a ticket. You are dependent on a ticket and a voucher and a legal right to a certain allotment of goods that this body gives to you and which it can taketh away. That's the point. And you've seen Donald Trump use this to great effect when he punishes other countries by threatening to remove aid or removing aid, or just flexing his muscle by removing aid. Those populations then are devastated by the retraction of aid, which is now treated correctly as murder. Why? Because those populations were dependent on this. And they didn't get it entirely for free, did they? The United States gained negotiating power and stakes where they did that.
Musk did there. But why?
That's not what Elon Musk did. What Elon Musk did was he broke into a bunch of systems with a bunch of fresh out of high school nutball computer science nerds and just stole data. He stole data and fired a bunch of random people and cut a bunch of things he didn't understand. That is not the same as being critical of the welfare state. If you are critical of the state at all, as most anarchists are, you are critical of the welfare state by definition. States allot goods. States do good things for people all the time. States keep people alive who would not be alive without states. Like does that make you pro-MAGA if you recognize that states keep people alive, that there are government programs that keep people alive, that keep people well?
He would like Donald Trump becoming president.
Macbeth or Dune Messiah, which one should I read next? Dune Messiah. Dune Messiah is better. Dune Messiah is better. It actually is better.
Is because the message throughout his books,
but Macbeth is very good,
embodied by Paul Atreides and Leto Atreides II, is that power can't be trusted. Bureaucratic governments.
The power can't be trusted. You think the message of the story is that power can't be trusted? What? Of course you can trust power. If you recognize something as power, you can trust it very well. It's power. It's there. It's great. Power can't be trusted? No. Stories that tell you the future can't be trusted. Stories that provide you with a sense that things make sense can't be trusted. That's what can't be trusted. Power can be trusted to be power.
Are bad. Centralized states are bad. And we need...
Centralized states are bad? What?
Need to show people that. So the character...
No, centralized states are vulnerable. They aren't intrinsically bad. They are vulnerable. We need to show people that. Nixon showed that the benign party of the country of freedom is ruled by freedom-hating serpents.
Of Leto Atreides II in Dune the God Emperor is basically Donald Trump if he was really self-aware and was a dictator for 3,500 years.
No, he's not, though. He's not, though. That's stupid. That's a really stupid thing to say. Is it because he has absolute power? Because the definition of Donald Trump is not absolute power. Donald Trump doesn't have absolute power. Donald Trump is in a brief window of time where he has enough capital on his side, and he's in between elections, and people are confused and demoralized enough that he's able to just do shit without intense domestic pushback for now, for a brief period of time. That is not what Leto the Second is. Leto the Second is not a creature of whimsy who says one thing then says another thing the next minute. Leto the Second is a human supercomputer of unfathomable competence. Like, what are you? No, absolutely not. Baron Harkonnen is closer to Trump than Leto is by miles. Like, if you want an analogy for contemporary politics, you want House Carino, House Atreides as well, because just to be clear, House Atreides, they seem nice. They're CEOs. House Atreides and House Harkonnen, those are your billionaire class. Those are your billionaire class. Trump is a big fat worm, though. That's true. That's true. But Harkonnen is basically Epstein eggs on Donald. Okay. That's what he is.
With the goal of making people so sick of this form of government, they would never tolerate it again.
Then he wouldn't rule for thousands of years.
And what Frank Herbert has argued is this is actually the way for humanity to survive, and that is the through line of the Dune books. That is the message of the Dune books. If you're going to take away one central message, is basically libertarianism is the way for humanity to survive.
No. How? What? No. No. How do you get that from there? The golden path is about humanity surviving the internal self-destructive contradictions of its own organization, so it can evolve into something that can grow and live for much longer than it would be on its current trajectory. The goal, it's not libertarianism. Like his own death is a great model for what Brooks is pointing out in the, like, when Leto dies with the foreknowledge that this will happen, he re-desertifies Arrakis because the sand trout fall off of him and end up repopulating Arrakis with sandworms, which terraform the planet because they aren't originally from there.
And self-reliance, human self-reliance on themselves and smaller communities is the way to thrive. But most of that is going to be covered in the next video, as just like how he's...
Okay, I don't care about this. I want to go play Resident Evil 9. We've been here for 2.5 hours. This is terrible. This is actually terrible. I'm gonna go over this more next stream. This segment will be put together later. I want to go play Resident Evil 9. This is, you know what? I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. I'm gonna jump ahead. Yeah, do I want to? Do I want to? Do I want to? Okay, hang on. Paul Atreides is inspired by... Let's see this quickly, okay? We'll look at this bit first, and then we'll move on to Resident Evil 9.
All self-reliant. Stop relying on welfare. Stop relying on government handouts. Like relying on the government for basically anything and not being able to live without their assistance. Donald Trump, Frank Herbert would say, would shatter that illusion for many, many people that the government would never help them. And lots of people have said Donald Trump is just the mask coming off. He's the mask coming off the US government. He's the mask coming off US imperialism. He's the mask coming off US fascism that was so underground for a long time, but we all knew it was actually there, especially
It wasn't underground. It just was targeting non-white people.
under people like George Bush. And he takes the mask off and he's like, this is what America is. This is what America is, and I'm going to show you what it is. And I think Frank Herbert would very much support that happening right now.
That doesn't mean he supports what Nixon did, you idiot. He appreciated the spectacle that Nixon represented. It doesn't mean he was pro what Nixon did. I like that we didn't even need to watch the section to get the argument. He thinks that he would be pro Donald Trump because Donald Trump exposes how corrupt the United States is. That doesn't mean he's pro Donald Trump, you idiot. Donald Trump is corrupt. He's against corruption. He just likes the fact that sort of like in Inglourious Bastards, you know, he's like, now I bet you're gonna take that uniform off when you get back. Yeah, see, that I can't abide. We like our Nazis where we can spot them like that. That's the point Frank Herbert is making. That's not an endorsement of Nixon. Are you insane?
So let's get into the stuff about Paul Atreides.
Let's check DMs for a hilarious comment. What? Oh my god. Good video. Ultimately, any critique Frank imbued is drowned out because the individualist and idealist nature of his writing. He's anti-idealist. He's almost explicitly anti-idealist. This does not detract from the enjoyment, especially of the first book, but it's impossible to ignore. Oh my god. I'm going to have an aneurysm. It is impossible to ignore that most of the series functions on great man theory. These clowns. Look, 51 upvotes. 51 upvotes on this comment. These clowns think Dune functions on great man theory. It's a deliberate flaying of great man theory. That's like reading Lord of the Rings and thinking it's about the virtues of workplace discipline. You know what? That's like thinking, you know what Tolkien really thought? He thought the tobacco industry really needed a firm hand on top to make sure the laborers, stayed in their homes and went to work on time and what? Wow. To be fair, it's what Peter Thiel did with Lord of the Rings. I think Peter Thiel took Lord of the Rings and thought, wow, I could be Sauron. That is I am in pain right now.
These first. So Frank Herbert's UCLA speech, 1985, a year before his death. I think he was probably in the process of finishing the 6th book. So he says here, I wrote the Dune series because I had this idea that charismatic leaders ought to come with a warning label on the forehead. May be dangerous to your health.
Oh, see, look. Charismatic leaders ought to come with a warning label on the forehead. That means, by definition, charismatic leaders ought to come. Ergo, ipso facto, vis-a-vis concordantly, Frank Herbert was in favor of charismatic leaders like Donald Trump. You got to use your brain, okay?
I mean, I think the most dangerous president we've had, or one of the most dangerous at least, not because he was a bad guy, but because people didn't question him. One of the most dangerous presidents that we've had in this century was Jack Kennedy, because people said, yes, sir, Mr. Charismatic Leader, what will we do next? And we wound up in Vietnam.
Yeah, that classic right-wing behavior, right? Classic pro-MAGA, pro-Donald Trump sentiment. I don't like the idea of everybody following a charismatic dude who leads us into unjustified wars of aggression. That's what I think of when I think of MAGA. I think of people who are just like, this Obama guy, he's all right. I agree with a lot of his ideas, but I'm just worried. I'm just worried he might be a little too hawkish on Iran. That's what you think of when you think of MAGA, right?
People don't realize that he was one of the major moving forces getting us into Vietnam because he locked us into a commitment there. So just...
Hey, that's the opposite of Donald Trump. This came out a day ago. Do you watch the news, Cav? I don't know if you watch the news. Go watch the news. Google search Donald Trump Iran, okay? You know what? Screw it. Go search Donald Trump Iran 2018. Go I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Are you serious?
Just to like kind of prove this guy's point, I did a history degree where we looked at the Vietnam War, and a lot of historians conclude that when JFK gave the okay to the CIA to help assassinate Diem, who was the dictator of South Vietnam at that point, they were basically making the commitment to stay in South Vietnam for the long term to fight the NLF.
Now, who does that sound like? Does that sound like Leto, or does that sound like Trump? Because these are different. This video feels like bait. It does feel like bait.
And prop up the South.
But the problem though is that Kavernacle has a history of incredibly terrible like literary takes, because he doesn't actually have a political education. I don't know what his background is, but he's incredibly vapid when it comes to this stuff. Like this is really vapid, and it's like you can't read books this way. This is not how this works. And I guarantee you this is timed. This is timed because the Dune 3 trailer came out. And there's not a whole lot of people who are going, Dune is actually pro-MAGA, because that's a provocative title. It's why we're watching it. And I guarantee you he has read the wiki, if even, for the novels after Children of Dune, because I don't think he's read Children of Dune. And he read Dune Messiah. I think he read Dune Messiah. Actually, I don't know he read Dune Messiah. I'm being charitable here. I don't know if he read any of Dune. I know that there are a lot of people on YouTube who will be happy to just flat out lie about having read stuff they haven't read.
Vietnamese government, which became just an outright military dictatorship after they helped the military assassinate the president. And it's pretty clear that if JFK didn't die, that the US would have remained in Vietnam. But then you have someone like Oliver Stone. Now, Oliver Stone obviously did, I think, 2 tours of Vietnam, taught in Vietnam English before that, and absolutely loves JFK. I think he sees like a kindred spirit in JFK as someone who fought in the military, but also reformed the military.
He's talking about the director who did a weird movie about how Nixon was a tragic figure who was just powerless. What?
And as his work in things like JFK go into these conspiracy theories about how the military-industrial complex, Cuban exiles, and the CIA assassinated Kennedy for this, people who believe in the cult of Kennedy fundamentally think he would have pulled the US forces out of Vietnam. And Frank Herbert was right here. JFK wouldn't have done that. JFK massively increased troops in Vietnam, special forces in Vietnam, and when, just before he died, when he gave the okay for the CIA to help the military assassinate the president of South Vietnam, regardless of what he even wanted to do after that, they just couldn't back out then. Otherwise, South Vietnam would fall because the government just completely relied on US support for everything after that. So he's very much right there, and that's obviously what he's based Paul Atreides on. But then he goes on to say, I think probably the most valuable...
He didn't base Paul Atreides on Jack Kennedy. He based Paul Atreides. Paul Atreides is an instantiation of the kind of charisma that he feared, of the kind of charisma that plays that role in the system. That's what he's... Paul Atreides is not Kennedy.
President of this century was Richard Nixon, because he taught us to distrust the government, and he did it by example, which is the best kind of teaching. I wanted to do this thing about messiahs and charismatic leaders. I mean, why do 900 people go to Guyana and drink poison Kool-Aid? Why do the citizens of an entire nation say Sig Heil? Why do they not question their leaders?
This is like saying, look, Frank Herbert was, pro the cult of Muad'Dib in Dune Messiah, where he describes the cultists of Muad'Dib as essentially degraded. And he talks about the degeneration of Fremen culture as a consequence of the cult of Muad'Dib. This would make Frank Herbert be against himself by being pro-MAGA. You have no idea what you're talking about. This is an incoherent thesis.
Now, in an earlier interview, 1969, he also says here, one of the threads of the story is to trace a possible way a messiah is created in our society. And I hope I was successful in making it believable. And here we have the entire process and some of the subtle elements of the construction of this from the individual standpoint and from the way society demands this subject. It's the reference in there, you know, that the man must recognize the myth he's living in, and the creation of an avatar is a myth-making process. We've done it in our recent times. Look at what's happening to JFK, who was very earthy and real, and not a totally holy man. And so we have a likable person now, you see, but real, flesh and blood sense, who by the process of immolation became something larger than life, far larger than life. Well, and I've just explored...
You say immolation? Who by the process of immolation, bracket immolation, not immolation.
All the permutations as I could recognize in the process. I caught the overtones of Lawrence of Arabia. He could have well have become an avatar for the Arabs if he had died at the crucial moment. Setting the stage there because you're seeing how Paul Atreides was created by Frank Herbert as this representation, and in response...
No, not as a representation.
...to people like JFK. Yes, there are...
No, not in response to people like JFK. JFK is an example, a contemporary example of the kind of thing he is talking about. It is not a representative of JFK. It is not a representative of anybody living. It is an example of something that is very, very common. This is terrible.
More obvious people he's inspired by, I would say Oedipus and Lawrence
like,
of Arabia.
do you know, have you watched Lawrence of Arabia? Is a long movie. Have you watched Lawrence of Arabia? Because again, the movie works here. Lawrence of Arabia is not a hero in Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia is a deeply troubled man who is whitewashed and becomes incredibly dangerous because of the myth around him in the community he's in, who struggles with very dark demons, actually.
Arabia is obviously a better amalgamation of two people, or one fictional character and one real person into this character, but you can obviously see the JFK influence. Now, you might be listening...
That's not there's no JFK influence in Paul Atreides. Frank Herbert did not sit down and write Paul Atreides as an analog for JFK in any capacity.
To me say all that stuff and say, well, you're making the JFK comparison, so how does this play into him supporting Donald Trump? So
here's a difference. Here's a difference. Paul Atreides did not want to go to war, and ended up going to war because the thing he was trying to manipulate was beyond him. It was too big. It was too big, and he was too weak. All he could do was see it. JFK did not have to do any of the things he did. At all. But his charisma, the expertise with which his image was constructed and made to be consumed by the public, made him very immune to the consequences of what would have happened if his actions were sort of laid bare. Nixon post-Watergate is a dirty, greasy, slippery son of a bitch. JFK is a martyr in a stupid level of American mythology.
Now we jump over, we skip the ending of Dune Messiah, which I'm trying not to spoil. We skip Children of Dune, and we enter the God Emperor of Dune.
I told you. I fucking told you. You skipped Children of Dune. You can't skip Children of Dune. Children of Dune is where Paul Atreides dies. But you don't know that because you didn't read the books. You can't skip. Children of Dune, I would argue, is almost more important than God Emperor of Dune.
Created by Frank Herbert as this representation, and in response to people like JFK. Yes, there are more obvious people he's inspired by. I would say Oedipus and Lawrence of Arabia is obviously a better...
Neither. I would say neither. I would say neither. I would say neither. The Oedipus did not have foresight. Oedipus was clever. Oedipus was clever and obsessed. Paul can see the future. Paul can see the future because he has such a mastery of interpretation of the ancestral data and the current data that he is able to process as a mentat. That he can basically play a very long game of chess, very, very many moves ahead for a little while. Children of Dune, by the way, is phenomenal.
Amalgamation of two people, or one fictional character and one real person.
Carefully, he's not seeing the future. He's able to see the potential occurrences. Yeah, I know, Brooks. Thank you. I know he's not literally seeing the future. There is no set future in Dune. That would defeat the purpose of there being a story. But he does correctly predict the future to the point where at retail it works out. In the way he foresees. No, he doesn't have as much foresight as Leto II. Leto II is the guy.
Person into this character, but you can obviously see the JFK influence. Now,
there is no JFK influence.
You might be listening to me say all that stuff and say, well, you're making the JFK comparison, so how does this play into him supporting Donald Trump? So now we skip.
Because guess what? There are other charismatic characters. For example, in Children of Dune, Aaliyah, like he at no point ever is he for charismatic leaders. At no point ever is he for uncharismatic leaders either. Because if you want an uncharismatic tyrant, like, I'm sorry, are you saying that he liked Baron Harkonnen? No, he just didn't like the fact that, you know, the Emperor was able to be Baron Harkonnen, but pretend he wasn't Baron Harkonnen because he had Baron Harkonnen do his dirty work.
The ending of Dune Messiah, which I'm trying not to spoil, we skip Children of Dune, and we enter the God Emperor of Dune. So, if you don't want any spoilers for anything to do with Dune, you're going to have to check out now. But Leto Atreides II is Paul Atreides' son, only son. And just like his sister, who is born to a reverend mother, you see that scene in the first Dune movie, she becomes fully conscious after she drinks the water of life. His two children also have this. So they have all the ancestral memories that a reverend mother would have. And also, they can completely see the future. And Leto...
At Suresh0T478 super chatted $5. Look at my illiterate leftist dog. I'd argue the interpretation of Starship Troopers as pro-fascism is less stupid.
The interpretation of the book Starship Troopers as pro-fascism isn't really that stupid at all, depending on the angle you take. The interpretation of the film as pro-fascism is incredibly brain damaged, bluntly. This is one of the most atrocious readings of Dune I have seen. Like, full stop.
Decides to save humanity, he will become the worm god emperor, who is essentially immortal. And what he's going to do to save humanity is he's going to create a total dictatorship, stagnate the human race, and he'll call it Leto's Peace. Leto's Peace means people will have their material needs met, but you won't be able to leave your planet. Spice trade is completely over, so people can't travel, and you're just going to live life as you have for the next 3,500 years. Essentially suffocating the human race and creating a memory so long lasting they will never forget what it was like to live under this centralized government. Like I've been saying, it's like if Donald Trump was self-aware. Imagine 100 years of Donald Trump dictatorship where you had no choice and you couldn't leave.
Let's be clear for a second, okay? the function of Leto's piece was to create pressure. It's actually kind of Nietzschean in a way. The function of Leto's piece was to create tremendous pressure. It was not a conservative desire like the Butlerian Jihad was, simply to make them fear a past regime. Because you can't do that. People hearken back to past regimes because they are a source of vengeance against people around now. That doesn't work. That's stupid. You don't effectively fearmonger people into not wanting a terrible past regime really badly, because we know that doesn't work. Because Elon Musk is Sieg Heiling in front of billions of people, and he was not eaten alive for it. That doesn't work. What it does do, though, is it creates tremendous pressure so that when it alleviates, they scatter. All that energy that's built up and frustrated has to go somewhere, and it goes out. Goes out. A part of where it goes, by the way, is in war too. Like, the scattering is not. This is not about creating a scary memory. This is about brute forcing evolution in the most cruel, violent way possible. It's just like, man, this is like reading the genealogy of morals and thinking that, look, guys, these are the morals Nietzsche thinks we should have. It's like, damn.
Generations of your family couldn't leave, and he'd keep reminding you how bad he is. Frank Herbert argues that would create such a response that people would never accept this form of government again.
No, it wouldn't. No, that would be dumb. That would make Frank Herbert a dum-dum.
So let's get into the book first. So I'm going to read you passages from God, Emperor of Dune, and then we're going to go into more of Frank Herbert's own politics that reflect so explicitly in this. And like I've been saying, out of all the Dune books, this is Frank Herbert's manifesto. In many ways, Leto Atreides is a self-insert of Frank Herbert, and once you read his own politics, you can hear his voice in the books through a lot of what he says. And the Bene Gesserit in later entries, they also fulfill this role as well, where they are essentially his voice in the books. But let's start this. Basically, Leto Atreides leaves journals. He leaves secret journals to help people understand what he did. So in his time, people obviously don't think he's self-aware. They don't think he's being this dictator on purpose to save humanity. They just think he's a tyrant. And he is remembered as a tyrant. But he does this tyranny on purpose. So he writes here, I was born Leto Atreides II, more than 3,000 standard years ago. My father was Paul Muad'Dib. My mother was his Fremen consort, Chani. My paternal grandfather died as many good Greeks did, attempting to kill his mortal enemy, the old Baron Harkonnen. Both of them rest uncomfortably now in my ancestral memories. Even my father is not content. I have done what he feared to do, and now his shade must share in the consequences. The Golden Path demands it. And what is the Golden Path, you ask? It is the survival of humankind, nothing more nor less. We who have prescience, we who know the pitfalls in our human futures, this has always been our responsibility. Survival. How do you feel about this? Your petty woes and joys, even your agonies and raptures, seldom concern us. My father had this power, I have it stronger. We can peer now again through the veils of time. The planet of Arrakis, from which I direct my multi-galactic empire, is no longer what it was in the days it was known as Dune. In those days, the entire planet was a desert. Now there's just a little remnant, my Sarir. No longer does a giant sandworm roam free, producing the spice melange. The spice, Dune, was noteworthy only as a source of melange, the only source. What an extraordinary substance. Without melange to ignite the linear prescience of the guild navigators, people crossed the parsecs of space only at a snail's crawl. Without melange, the Bene Gesserit cannot endow truth-sayers or reverend mothers. Without the geriatric properties of melange, people live and die according to the ancient measure, no more than 100 years or so. Now the only spice held in Guild and Bene Gesserit storehouses, a few small hoards among the remnants of the great houses, and my gigantic hoard which they all covet. How they would like to raid me, but they don't dare. They know I would destroy it all before surrendering it. They come hat in hand and petition me for melange. I dole it out as a reward and hold it back as punishment. How they hate that. It is my power, I tell them, it is my gift. With it I create peace. They have had more than 3,000 years of Leto's peace. It's an enforced tranquility which humankind knew only for the briefest periods before my ascendancy. Lest you have forgotten, study Leto's peace once more in these, my journals. I begin this account in the first year of my stewardship, in the first throes of my metamorphosis, when I was still mostly human.
It's an incredibly long quote.
Even visibly so. The sand trout skin which I accepted and my father refused, and which gave me gratefully amplified strength plus virtual immunity from conventional attack and aging, that skin still covered a form recognizably human, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a human face, framed in the scrolled folds of the sand trout. So when he talked about his father rejecting it, that's basically what Paul Atreides deals with. He could become the worm, and he sees the same future as Leto. He sees the end of humanity, and he can't do it. He can't become the worm because, as I'd argue in a video more about people getting Paul Atreides wrong, he's a more moral character, and he doesn't have the stomach for it, where
That's not it.
Leto, who was born with someone who has like the Reverend Mother ancestral memory and is born as basically a baby, as a fully formed adult with all of human knowledge in his head, he's the one who says, I will do it. I can see the end of humanity and I must save us. The only way to save us is to ensure humans never accept this form of government again, and they scatter. And
This guy thinks that Leto's piece was the Hunger Games. This guy thinks that I can't with this guy. He hasn't read the books. This is it. You cannot read the books and come away with this. This is so dumb. But it's also malicious, and I really hate this kind of thing because it makes people not respect the thing that they're reading when they do. It makes people think they can skip over it. It makes people think that material that assholes who make content on the cheap misrepresenting is not worth the time or the investment to actually understand, and they miss out as a result. This kind of shit is atrocious and abhorrent, and I have no respect for it. I'm gonna go play Resident Evil 9 now on Present Sunday Dark. We will raid in, and I will be live there in 5 minutes. See you there.